Hey folks, Scott Walters here. Welcome back to the Bulletproof Garage. Today we're going to replace the wooden deck on my 18-foot car hauler trailer. So let's get started. Okay, so this is just a generic car hauler. It's 18 feet with a 2-foot dovetail. I bought it new about 6 years ago, and that is the original deck on it. It is not treated wood, all right? So that's just number 2 yellow pine. And as you can see, it's rotting, all right? There's some rot here, and there's some rot over there as well. And I periodically haul stuff on this that's maybe a little heavy, or maybe has some value. So I don't want to run the risk of something breaking through the deck, all right? Yeah, I could probably replace just those 2 boards and get by for another year or so, but let's go ahead and do the whole thing. Here are the tools that you're going to need, all right? So, yeah, you're going to need a circular saw at some point. You're going to need a drill and some drill bits. You're going to need something to remove the screws that have your current deck screwed in, maybe a pry bar or 2. Definitely some hearing protection, eye protection, and some gloves. You may need something to cut through the metal that holds the deck in place and or grind through it. Yeah, you're going to need a tape measure. A sawzall is always handy to have when doing a job like this. And it's also good to have a chalk line as well. All right, not absolutely required. Here's something else you might find handy, all right? So these are chainsaw wedges. So, you know, I've got a bunch of chainsaws, and so I had these on the shelf, but they're inexpensive. They're hard plastic. These are about 5 inches, and those are about 8 inches. I'll put a link below in the description to where you can find some, but they're very helpful when getting the spacing correctly in between your boards if you're not going to butt them up against each other super tight. All right, so again, link in the description. Good piece of gear, and if you don't have any, chisels will work too if you've got a few larger ones, so you can use those as well. Okay, let's talk about hardware, all right? There's some lessons learned here. This is probably the most important part of the video. Starting up top, what we have is a self-drilling screw, okay? The self-drilling screw, I did not use these, right? So basically what it does, you skip the drill bit and you just use this to drill through the wood and then the metal. Look, that took me some time and some effort. That is not really sharp. So I tried these and wasn't a big fan. Another problem with these, the ones that I picked up have a Phillips head. That is no bueno. You really need to put some torque into these fasteners. You got to put some pressure on them, and a Phillips head is going to cam out more often than not. To me, that is just a waste of time. They might have worked better if they had a Torx head, but these were no good. And this is going to be about 2 3/4 inches long. Now, everything else here is 2.5 inches long, and they all have 1/4 inch threads that are coarse threads. So in theory, if you wanted to put a bolt on there to snug them up, you know, even better to hold them in place, you could do so. All right. So yeah, I guess if you wanted to go ahead and bolt your trailer deck together, this is what you could use right here. Okay. You could drill 1/4 inch holes and and use a bolt and a washer on the end, but then you've got these bolts protruding through your deck, and then you're having to go underneath and put nuts and washers on the back end. All right. So what do we have next? So what we have now, these are all self-tapping. You also see them called thread cutting, all right? So the drill with these, no pun intended, is that you're going to drill a hole that is slightly undersized, all right? So you're not going to drill 1/4 inch holes. You're going to drill, I drilled 7/32 holes. Again, the manufacturer of the fastener will tell you what size drill bit to use, but for the ones I use, these guys right here, I used a 7/32 inch drill bit, all right, which is going to be around this size right here, and then this will cut threads, all right? That keeps you from having to tap, using a tap to tap the threads in each hole. Now, these are, again, 2.5 inch long. They've got the Torx head. Use the Torx head. Trust me on this. And they're galvanized. And why did I use galvanized? Because I am using treated lumber for my deck. And treated lumber has chemicals in it that will accelerate corrosion or rust in anything except for galvanized or stainless. So, and these are expensive. I could only find one place that had them. I'll put a link in the description below. They were $1.60 a piece, and I got 80 of them. All right, I'm not going to do public math, but that's a fair amount of change for 80 fasteners. Now, another thing about those fasteners, though, out of 80, I broke 2. Okay, so 2 failures out of 80. I thought that was pretty good. Now, if you're not using treated lumber for your deck, do yourself a favor. This is the hot ticket right here, all right? This is a black oxide coating, 2.5 inches long. Again, this is self-tapping. You also see it called thread cutting with a Torx head, all right? Inexpensive, they're gonna work great. That's what I had on my trailer initially because it didn't have treated lumber. Now, here's the painful part. This is a stainless steel fastener, all right? Just like the galvanized, it's 2.5 inches. It's thread cutting or self-tapping. It's got a Torx head, but the problem with stainless is that stuff is soft, okay? So I had some serious problems. You can see right here, what would happen is it would start into the hole and it would not cut any threads, all right? It would just strip and strip and strip. I must have broken off about 5 of those. The heads would just snap off at some point, right? And it was just a complete fiasco, all right? So this strips, the head pops off. I don't know if I got a bad batch or what. I found these on eBay. They were $1 a piece, all right? And I returned them because I was making no headway. Now, the only way that I can think of to use these is either just drill 1/4 inch holes and put a nut washer and a nut on the bottom of them, but that makes 0 sense to me because that's a lot of extra work. Or maybe you could try one size larger drill bit, but I don't think so. I just don't think these are going to cut those threads in that angle iron that you've got under your trailer deck. Okay, I need to fast forward a little bit because we really need to talk about lumber at the beginning of the video, and I just didn't do that. So this is what was on the deck originally. That's a 2x10, and it was, it's just regular yellow pine. It wasn't treated, it was just painted black, and it lasted about 6 years before it started to rot. Now, I went back with treated lumber, okay? So this trailer is 18 feet long, all right? So it's 16 feet up until the dovetail, and at the dovetail, you got a little bit more than 2 feet here. So I went ahead and I got 2x10s by 20 feet long, and I got them from Lowe's. Lowe's doesn't carry this length in treated lumber in these dimensions, right? But they'll special order it for you. I want to say it cost me close to 400 bucks. Okay, now let's talk about shrinkage. All right, most of y'all know that a 2x10 is really not 2 inches by 10 inches. It's 1.5 inches by 9.25 inches, and lumber will shrink over time. So this guy right here is the old piece that was on here, all right? And that's right at 9 1/8 inches wide. And I will tell you that the treated lumber that I got has already shrank. So I've measured all of these, and I'm getting anywhere from 9 1/16 to 9 3/16 inches, all right? So I got this lumber about a month ago, And so I didn't measure it when I got it, and I should have. But I can tell you right now that it's already at, some of it is just barely over 9 inches wide. So just something to keep in mind when you're deciding how much of a gap you're going to have in between your boards after you screw them down and the lumber shrinks a little bit, okay? All right, so let's talk about the fasteners that are screwed into the deck right now. They're screwed in here, all right, all the way across, and that's 2 per board. And right here between the fenders, all right, again, we've got 2 per board. Sometimes you've got 1 per board, it looks like. And then near the back, not far from the dovetail, you've got another set that are screwed in. Looks like 2 per board, sometimes 1 per board. And I'm going to go ahead and try to get as many of these out as I can. It's not going to be easy because they've been in here for a while and they're rusty. But basically what I do is I take a little pick and I kind of get the dirt out of there. And once I get the dirt out of there, I'll see if I can't go ahead and unscrew them. Must have stripped. No, there it comes. Okay, I've got all the screws out of the 2 far boards down there. Let's see if they'll come up. Yep. All right, it's time to break out the circular saw, but first make sure you go under the trailer and check to see if there are any wires that you might cut through, all right? And when you're cutting the boards, leave them kind of long so you can use some leverage to pull them out of the screws. Okay, so now I'm at the dovetail and I've got 2 pieces of metal to remove. This one right here and this one right here, okay? So this is a piece of angle iron and this is what holds the boards on the deck, all right? So this is at the back of the deck. And this guy right here, this little strip here, holds on the boards, the 2 feet boards on the dovetail. Now, I could have taken these off earlier. Might have made things a little bit easier, but I wasn't having any trouble getting the wood off of the deck, all right? But they definitely have to come off now because we could get the long boards on, all right, on the deck, but the dovetail would not be easy to figure out how we could do that. Yeah, we would run out of room. So we got to do a little cutting and grinding here and here. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Okay, let me show you what's going on here. Okay, this is the strip right here that holds on the 2-foot long boards on the Dovetail, and I've just about got that thing cut off. All right. Okay, so once I get this strip off, then the angle iron has to come off, and the angle iron is welded here, and it's also welded down below. All right, you can see in there, it's welded in there as well. So I'm going to have to get the angle iron off, and then I'm going to have to replace the boards on the deck, and then I'm going to have to get the angle iron back on and weld it, and I've got to have access to the back here. So once I weld it, then I can replace the 2-foot boards in the Dovetail and weld this strip back on as well. All right, there we go. Okay, so there you have it. All right, so I think I've probably broken off about half a dozen screws. You can see 2 right here. They're really not going to interfere with anything, but if they were sticking up, I would just grind them flush. But I'm going to take some pliers or some vice grips and see if I can get them out of there. It's nothing you have to do, but just take a few minutes. It'll make me feel better. Another thing I think I want to do is, see these cross members? You know, they're going to sit with some water on top of them. So some of them have got a fair amount of scaly rust on them. So I think I'm going to hit them with a wire brush and then a shot of some rust preventive paint. All right, we swapped the cutoff wheel for a brush. All right, let's put this on the rusty metal. All right, so now is a good time to check out your wiring before you get some boards back on it. You know, the biggest issue I had was I had wires that were going through the frame in places like this with no protection. So as you can see, I just stuck some wire loom in there and got it something in between the wires themselves in the frame so they won't go ahead and, you know, frictional wear through them. You'll end up with the short. Next thing you know, you've got no lights. Okay? All right, now I'm going to go ahead and mark the center of these cross members so I know where to drill holes. Okay, so I just went ahead and marked the center of the cross members, and then on the ones that have holes in them, and there are 3 of them that do, I just put a little X. And then I realized I won't be able to see the X when the board's right there, so I just put a little mark right on top. All right. All right, I've got some weld through primer, and I'm going to use that to paint the spots on the 1/8 inch thick angle that I'm going to have to weld to the frame. All right, let's talk about a problem I ran into because of the lumber being crooked. So all your lumber is going to be crooked to some extent, but what happened is that when I got all the 2x10s on the deck of the trailer, the gap between them was an inch, more than an inch greater at the front end than it was at the back end. And the problem is not that the boards were narrower, but that they were crooked, all right? So I'm not too worried about the straightness in this plane right here. As you can see, this one curves down at the end. But Looking at it from this angle, I don't know if you can see that or not, this one is actually pretty straight. But the problem lies when you've got one that is crooked pointing this way on the end, and then you've got another that's crooked pointing that way on the end, and that's where you end up with that gap. Because if they're both crooked this way, that's really not such a big deal, all right? But this way and this way, then you're going to end up with a gap, wider on one side than the other. So I pulled all the boards off, and then I'm going to put them back in, and I'm going to pay attention to whether they're crooked or not in that plane, and I'm just going to try to match them up, all right, so I don't have that big gap. Hey, before I forget, one quick tip. Make sure that your wood has an unhappy face. You see the grain here? Everything is oriented in the same way, all the way across. You don't want your boards to warp and to cup, all right? So if they cup and they have a smiley face instead of a frown, they're going to collect water right in the middle. Alright, so this board right here is a 2x10 that we ripped down. If I had to do it all over again, I'd probably rip it about a 1/4 inch wider and tighten up those gaps just a little bit, because remember, as I think I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this lumber is going to shrink over time, and if you don't have any gaps when you build it, you will end up with gaps once it shrinks. But you know what, this is fine. At least now water's not going to pool on the top of the trailer at all, you know, even when it's brand new and before the lumber shrinks. All right? All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to put down some chalk lines so we know where to drill the holes. Okay, so I've done a few iterations already, and let's go ahead and talk through how it's done, all right? So here's the front of the trailer, all right? And there's one cross member that's screwed in, all right? Another cross member that's screwed in, and here's my chalk line for the last one, and I'll tell you what worked for me. First thing I want to do is address these gaps right here. You know, it's really not going to make any difference, in my opinion, on how well the deck works on your trailer, but it just doesn't look great. So, I'm going to take my felling wedges here, and I'm just going to space out the gaps a little bit. And I start from the outside, and I work my way in. Alright, you know, I know not everybody's got a bunch of felling wedges in the garage, so, you know, you can use a pry bar, you can use a chisel, so, whatever floats your boat. Alright, right, we're going to call that good enough for government work. All right, let's drill some holes. I've got a 7/32 drill bit. And I'm going to use some of this stuff, all right? So that is cutting tool wax. And I'm putting that on the drill bit so they'll last a little bit longer. And I'm not sure you can see from here, but we're going to put 2 holes in each board, and the chalk line goes right across there. All right, now we take the same cutting wax, put some on the self-tapping screw here. And yeah, you can do this dry, but I found that it works a little bit better, right? Remember, we're cutting threads here. All right, once I've got them snug, you know, I'm going to go ahead and go kind of slow here because I don't want them to strip out. And I had so much problems with the stainless steel ones that I'm going to take my time and make sure they are all in. Obviously, you can use a driver of some sort, you know. Do this with your impact. You can do it with your screwdriver, but again, at $1.60 a screw, I'm just going to take a minute and do these all by hand. I just like to get it to where the head is digging into the wood a little bit. All right. All right, we've had a change of venue because I'm welding. My welder is here at the shop. So this is where we're going to finish up all the welding on the trailer.
Okay, now I'm cutting the short boards for the dovetail that go on the back of the trailer. Okay, so this is the board I cut for the back of the trailer. As you can see, there's a dovetail here. So beveled, so you can catch that. Put a 12-degree bevel on there just because of the way the dovetail sits and the way that that's going to butt up against the angle iron that's going to get welded in here to hold the boards down. And that's just going to slide in here. Angle iron goes there, flat bar goes on top of that, and that's it. All right, so circular saw, most people know how to use regular circular saw. You can adjust the depth with this, so how deep your blade's going to cut into your piece of wood. But in order to get that bevel, a lot of folks don't realize there's an adjustment piece here. You can actually put an angle on your blade. So I'll go ahead and release this, and I'll show you. If you're looking at the plane here and the blade, you can loosen this, adjust it to whichever angle you need. And there's a little gauge here. You can go 20 degrees, lock it down. There you go.
All right, what I've got here is some 2-inch angle. It's an 1/8 of an inch thick. This is what's going to hold down the boards on the back where it meets the dovetail, right? So it was sitting a little tall, so I took about 1/8 of an inch off the bottom here and also put weld-through primer where I'm going to be welding. So this is a flat bar. It's 1 inch wide and an 1/8 inch thick. And I've got to cut this to length, and then that just gets welded on top of this angle right here to keep the front of these boards on the dovetail in place. All right, now I just need to put a few welds on this piece of flat bar, and that's about it. Now, if you want your deck to last as long as possible before it's rotted out, you want to go ahead and seal it. Yes, even if it's treated wood, you want to go ahead and seal it. But before you seal it, you want to make sure that it is dry enough to go ahead and take sealant, all right? So what we're going to do is we're going to pour some water on several of the boards. And now we're going to wait for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, if the water is soaked up into the board, you can go ahead and put sealant on it. If not, let it cure for a little bit longer. Okay, 10 minutes is up, and as you can see, the water is pretty much all soaked into the deck. The water that hasn't soaked into the deck, though, it's not beading. So the stain and sealer that I'm going to use will be able to penetrate the wood. So we're going to go ahead and seal it. Okay, and this is what we're going to use. This is a wood tone stain plus sealer. Shouldn't really make the wood that much darker, and it is oil based. Okay, so a week has passed since I did the water test on the wood, so it should be even drier. So I'm going to go ahead and brush on some of this Cabot wood tone stain and sealer, and this is oil based. All right, should be pretty simple. All right, let's check out the finished product. Now, several months have passed since I actually applied the sealer on the deck. So here are some pictures, some still pictures that I took when it was nice and fresh. And man, it just looks fantastic. And again, I want to say it's probably been 5 months, but you know, the trailer's been sitting out here in the sun in Texas, and yeah, it's a little dirty, but man, that still looks pretty good. Now, a few other upgrades that I've done on the trailer. I put radials on it. I got sick of replacing bias ply tires. I'll put a link to the description below for those. Let's see what else. I also put this box on the front. Man, that has come in handy. I got tired of schlepping my straps around and tools every time I wanted to, you know, go pick up a car or needed to tow something. Yeah, that is a good piece of gear. And I also added another spare tire carrier, all right? Initially, I think it had one on the passenger side, and when I was welding on the trailer to put the angle iron back on, I went ahead and copied the spare tire mounts on the passenger side, and I put one on the driver's side. And you cannot have too many spare tires, if you ask me. All right, let's see if water will still bead on there. Yeah, that does not look like it's soaking in. All right, good to go. Now, you need to maintain this finish here, right? So I am going to have to reapply, I'll reapply the same stuff that I've applied already in about a year. So I think all you need to do to prep it is just give the surface a good cleaning, and as long as it's clean and dry, you just go on it, go over the top of that with another coat. I don't think you need to sand that down, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. All right, folks, that is it for this episode of the Bulletproof Garage. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope you found the video helpful. And if you did, do me a favor and hit the thumbs up button down below. Doesn't cost you a penny, and it helps out the channel. 2, if you're not a subscriber, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Again, hit the button down below. 3, post up a comment. I love to hear from y'all, all right? I want to hear what y'all would have done different, what I could have done better, or maybe even something that I did right, all right? So love hearing from y'all. I read each and every comment, and I probably respond to about 90% of them, at least the serious ones. And finally, poke around on the channel some. As of today, I think I've got 44 videos up. I think this is video number 45. We got all sorts of stuff. We got 4x4 stuff. We got engine building stuff. We got heavy equipment. We've got F-350s, diesel dualies, a little bit of everything. So I guarantee that you will find something else that you like. All right, thanks. And we'll see you next time on the Bulletproof Garage.